what we're dealing with on the street. We had a homicide in the middle of the afternoon. We've had multiple stabbings going on. Despite this call for accountability and questioning of every single thing we're doing, our officers are still doing the jobs that they need to do, because the bottom line is they're out there protecting law-abiding people in the neighborhoods that need us the most. And that's what we're out there doing, to stop the people that are carrying guns, that want to go in and destroy neighborhoods and harm our children. Yet all the focus that we hear is about misinformation on accountability for police officers. That's not what the problem is in this city right now. We're dealing with, I think, a crisis in the number of guns that are on the street. And the last thing we should be doing is putting our officers in a position where they're questioning their own actions, and that's a serious concern. If it becomes a point where they have some type of feeling or insight that maybe an individual is doing something wrong, but they're going to step back from it, perhaps because of criticism, or do I have enough? Can I do this? Because now you certainly have to have at least a law degree to figure out every single thing you're doing at a split second.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, Mike, if you don't mind. When you say that the officers are sort of under an unfair scrutiny, what is different now between the behavior that they can use on the job and what was different 5 years ago, say? I mean, are they getting punished and penalized for how they talk to suspects? Are they getting punished and penalized for their interactions? What does that look like?
What's occurring is, anytime they're engaged with an individual who doesn't comply with their lawful orders and force is being used, it becomes an issue of misconduct and brutality. And that's not the case. I think if we look at issues or situations where an officer is either responding to a 911 call or they have some other information that when they are able to stop an individual, question them, they comply, they either go on their way or it's determined that they're the individual in question, like what's happened in the last couple of weeks, where we're stepping out with individuals based on 911 calls. They're running, we're chasing them, and we're getting guns. But guess what? You run, you chase someone, and you don't find a gun. The officer's wrong. That's the difference now. And we can't do anything different. It's our responsibility, and it's what the neighborhoods need for us to protect. The people that need us the most, in the neighborhoods that need us the most, want us there. I think what most of this is based on is a small group with a biased opinion that don't even live in the city, quite frankly.
So are you saying that the group of 200 the other day basically had no respect for the officers? I mean, what if we were to see the body-worn camera video footage, what would we see?
You'd see profanity, vulgarity, trying to invoke officers, comments like, we'll shoot the police, we're going to blank the police, blah, 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 blah. That's what you do also hear, and you see in those video, the body-worn camera videos, is the constraint on the officers' parts, which is still incredible to me in this type of chaos, that you hear them responding, that you hear them speaking, giving simple orders out. No one's being degraded. No one's being spoken to disrespectfully, except on the other side. You do hear an officer swear, and that's after a rock almost takes his eye out. We've had 3 officers that have been scrutinized and may face some type of discipline in the last few months for swearing during very high stressful situations. It's getting absurd. It's getting crazy. I dare anyone to work under those chaotic, stressful conditions and not respond as a human being. And I don't think anyone wants that to occur.
Who's making the decision on disciplining officers who are swearing? Is that coming from the mayor's office? Is it coming from the chief's office? Where is it coming from?
I think this is a result of this call for accountability. I think it's having an effect on the over-scrutinizing of officers now, the nitpicking on things that are just baseless, like a swearing in a moment of stress. I think it's all over the result of the pressures that everyone's feeling by this proposed legislation, which is, for the most part, based on inaccuracy and misinformation. What we should be looking at is what we need in the city, what's unique to the city, where our problems are, not take in legislation that comes from other parts of the country that have different problems than we do. We don't have the complaints. We don't have the issue. And why? Because our training standards, our hiring standards, all exceed even state mandates and requirements. However, what you are seeing, and what should be a major concern to people in the city, is people who are coming out to become police officers. In the last examination, we had 700 people take the test, and we used to have 5,000, 6,000. That leaves us a very small pool. At the same time, we're having officers retire because they just can't deal with the scrutiny and the criticism. You can't hire people as well when they're seeing the level of scrutiny and criticism you have and you're facing.
You got to meet them halfway, though, right? There has to be some accountability. So
Absolutely.
Where is that line?
Listen, I think we do it very well. We do it better than any other city in this state. Follow the standards. Look at the Center for Governmental Research. They show our standards. When we addressed City Council, I asked them if they understood our internal process. I said, have you ever even been in the room where officers are compelled to give statements? It's a small room, maybe by 5 by 8 feet, with a stenographer, 2 sergeants. It's a very stressful interview process where they have to answer every question. No officer looks forward to going through any type of review like that, and that continues for a long period of time. What we have to understand and stop is that we're not going to get an answer the very next day to an incident that occurs. And there's a number of reasons for it, because you have to do a thorough investigation, and you have to follow this process, and you have to have due process rights as well, like everyone else in this country is given the opportunity. We don't jump to conclusions, and we ask the same for our people. Give us the benefit of doubt, and I think that's gone with what's going on across the country. And the calls for this police accountability in this city has given us a false sense of what reality really is in this city. And I think as we see the reactions to our officers engaging with individuals, I think it's directly correlated to this fact. The amount of disrespect that is being given to police officers and the ability not to comply with a simple lawful command. And I don't hear any of our elected officials standing up and saying that. One of our interviews today, we had a council member who spoke about being stopped by the police on a number of occasions and said that they did not know who I was. I never identified myself as a city council member, and I found them completely respectful. Why aren't you saying that? We hear everything else. We hear that the community demands police accountability. I'm not hearing that from the community. What we're hearing is we need you in our neighborhoods and we need help. And why aren't there more police officers? And I'm at a loss why the people that have the loudest voices aren't coming forward and saying this is not accurate and this is not correct. And let's look at what we're facing. In a couple weeks, the city's going to release their crime data, and we're all going to see it again, that crime's going down, and there's no problems. But all of you know, because you're out there. You were there a couple months back when we had an individual that terrorized the city, and 13 of our members put their life on the line to protect the family of that individual as well as the other neighborhoods there. That's what we're facing on the street. And if we're going to talk about transparency and accountability, we have to discuss that as well. this proposed legislation for police discipline is not the answer. The answer is for our leaders from the department and City Hall to get in front of the cameras when a situation arises that there's concern on, and be transparent, and we have not been transparent. I think there's some changes we can make, but it's going to involve transparency. It's going to involve educating the public about what force is and what force isn't. Let's have those conversations, not simply pass some type of legislation in which a council president may say it may be historic. Not for Rochester, maybe somewhere else in this country. Thank God we don't have the problems that are faced around the country. But I think we're creating them here by this false expectation of what people are having with police responses.
So just some background, Mike, the melee from Saturday night, there was about 200 people. What was the age range, would you say, of most of them? Teenagers or 20s or less than that?
It's hard to tell. And let's be clear, that night, we left the rest of the city vulnerable while those officers responded to that situation. The only reason why it was over in the time that it ended was because of the rain and the temperatures out there that was going on. Had that been a clear, warm night, I don't know how many more officers would have been injured. I don't know how many other people in that neighborhood would have been hurt.
Was it a block party? What was it? It was like kind of a community center area, right?
Apparently, you can rent that community center, Danforth, and it was some type of party. There was no information prior that anything was going on there. And like I said, our officers responded to calls from the neighborhood, first on noise and then on the issues of a gun, shots being fired, total chaos, and like I said, fights going on, a female unconscious on the ground.
Was she
and
drunk,
then
or what
no, she was apparently knocked unconscious.
during the fight, during a fight.
You know, and
And so if you want to see, just on background, if the union wants to see the video for that, do they give it to you, or you have to file a FOIL? How does that work?
No, we have the ability to have access to it if it's not locked down because of maybe an investigation or so forth. One of the body cameras probably would have gave us some good quality view of what that officer was facing, but it fell off him and it was stolen. So there's one body camera that we don't have anymore.
So someone threw the rock. Were they like surrounding the officers? Like, with officers, did they think that they were in danger? Or did the rock just sort of come out of nowhere, or were people throwing things?
That's the part that I don't think we're grasping, that when you're in a scene of that nature, you only see a few feet on either side of you. There's so many people. There's so many actions going on. Very chaotic. You're trying to focus on specific things. You may be focused on one thing when something's occurring right next to you. Yeah. And that it's very, very difficult. It's difficult to understand what's even going on. Right. It's also difficult to understand where the other officers are and who may need help and who may not. The officer that was injured, he had to be walked out by two other officers because he did not want to leave his brothers and sisters that were clearly outnumbered, despite the injury that he faced.
And that picture is like underneath the eyebrow?
Right above.
Right above.
Right above the eye. Another, I don't know, quarter of inch, half inch, it probably would have took his eye out. And that individual was arrested.
Who threw the rock?
Who threw the, and my understanding is that he admitted to doing it.
Oh, it's like this side. It's like the inside, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Like across,
Yeah.
maybe across here.
Yeah, there's the eyebrow there.
Yep.
Can I have the photo so I can, sorry, thank you. This is the upright position? This is right?
That's the eyebrow up on
This is
top. Yep. Here, I'll show you. This is after cleaned up a couple days after.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a good one.
So some stitches in there. See, is there stitches?
Yep.
Yeah.
Another officer was injured, sustained a hand injury, taken, I believe, the suspect into custody as well.
Can you hold it this way?
So aside from that melee over the weekend, you mentioned a couple other incidents where they were either threatened, or do you know what the nature of those were? Were they things that we might have video of, or events? Or?
What our officers are finding is that in just about any situation they're responding to, they're being confronted in a, how do you say, in a way that we have never had to face before. Total disrespect, almost like the officers have no right to be there doing their job.
Right.
And I think it's at this point in time that we have to understand that there's a job that we have to do out there, and we have to be able to do it. And in fact, there's been recent situations where our officers are going through disciplinary process where it's over an individual that resisted lawful orders.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why, in some occasions, that we place handcuffs on somebody until we can clearly understand them for the safety of the officers and other people in those areas. There's a case that goes back a couple of years that talks about an individual on a bike going through a scene just as chaotic and just as with probably just as many individuals, probably more, where information was that the individual had a handgun. How?
Do you feel like there's more guns on the streets, or people are just more empowered to try and use them?
Oh, listen, just the events I told you in the last couple of days, but if we went back about 2 weeks, there was one afternoon where they broke roll call, got into a foot chase immediately, recovered a gun. As soon as they were barely done with that one, there was another foot chase with another gun being recovered. That's what we're seeing out there. That's what we're facing. You're seeing it all around the country. It's a concern. It's a problem. And children, or anyone else for that matter, are not safe in neighborhoods with people that are doing illegal things and carrying guns.
Did officers have to chase these kids?
The individual who threw the rock was chased down and arrested in that situation. And understand, we get 911 calls because people, law-abiding people in the neighborhoods, are calling and saying, this person has a gun. We respond. We have an obligation at that point as well. And then when the individual runs, and we have to take action on it, and we're recovering the guns, that's great. But what happens in the situations when we have to use force or chase someone down and then there's no weapon? We don't have the luxury of allowing that person to continue on down the street where there may be other people out on the sidewalks and on the corners that could be harmed by someone with a weapon. We can't walk away.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
For taking us in today.